The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is the lead and coordinated law enforcement agency in the fight against economic and financial crimes. Its core mandates include the prevention, investigation, and prosecution of economic and financial crimes, as well as the recovery of proceeds derived from crimes. The Eagle is one of the medium the Commission uses in its preventive measures to inform, educate, and sensitize the Nigerian populace on the ills of corruption, economic and financial crimes, and ways to join in curbing it. Hello and thanks for joining us on another episode of The Eagle. My name is Aisha Mohammed.
I am Abdurrashid Bawa. I stand against corruption. I call on every patriotic Nigerian to lend their voices in this crusade. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. Together we will make Nigeria great.
First on our lineup today is a story from the Lagos command of the EFCC, where the executive chairman of the commission, Abdurrashid Bawa, appeared in court and continued with his testimony as the prosecution witness in a case of an alleged oil subsidy fraud, which involves Nadabo Energy boss Abubakar Ali Peters and his company, Nadabo Energy Limited. Ojocho Kutami Eche is our guide on the proceedings.
Justice S.S. Ogunsanya of the Lagos State High Court, sitting in Ikeja, Lagos, has admitted in evidence several documents tendered by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, against one Abubakar Ali Peters and his company, Nadabo Energy Limited, in an alleged 761.6 million naira fraud. Abubakar and his company are being prosecuted by the EFCC over a 21-count charge bordering on obtaining money under false pretense, diversion of federal government funds, and forgery to the tune of 761,628,993 naira 84 kobo, an offense contrary to Section 1, Subsection 3 of the Advance Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act No. 14 of 2006. Peters, who was arraigned on October 7, 2015, had pleaded not guilty when the charges were read to him, thereby prompting the commencement of his trial. At the resumed sitting, the executive chairman of the EFCC, Abdurrashid Bawa, continued his examination in chief as a second prosecution witness. Led in evidence by the prosecuting counsel, S.K. Ate, the prosecution, through the witness, tendered in evidence several documents, as Bawa further testified to the findings of the investigation he led into the alleged fraud. The prosecution witness said in 2015, a complaint was received from the then Minister of Petroleum Resources, Diezani Alison Madweke, alleging fraud in the importation of PMS by Nadabo, and equally received a petition from Falana and Falana Chambers dated 17th of January 2012. He said the petitions, which also included a complaint from a civil society group, formed the bedrock of the investigation into Nadabo Energy Limited. However, when the prosecution sought to tender the documents in evidence, the defense counsel, E.O.E. Siramin, raised objections to their admissibility. Citing the sections of the Evidence Act and other authorities, he argued that the documents referencing the letter of complaint emanating from the civil group did not meet the criteria stated in the Act, particularly that there is no proof of payment for certification in line with established judicial authority that certification requires payment. Opposing the objection, Ate cited the case of Sule Lamido versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, arguing that the Commission is an agency of the federal government and has no prescribed fee to be paid for certifying documents emanating from it. After listening to the arguments, the trial judge dismissed the objection and admitted the documents as Exhibits P2 to P5. Thereafter, Bawa told the court that a special team was constituted by the EFCC to probe the subsidy regime, and the first port of call was the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPPRA. He also noted that after meeting with PPPRA, the defendant was among many involved in importing petroleum. And based on intelligence from PPPRA, all the banks involved were written to, including the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, the Debt Management Office, DMO, Nigeria Port Authorities, NPA, NIMASA, the Nigerian Navy, and many other companies involved in dealing with Nadabo Energy Limited. All the marketers were also invited to come forward with the documents they submitted to PPPRA. Bauer said in this particular case, the commission wrote to Abubakar Ali Peters and his company, inviting them to bring forward all documents submitted. On 28 January 2012, he came to the office and Bauer personally interviewed him. Bauer added that the PPPRA was thereafter contacted to furnish the EFCC with the certified true copies of all documents submitted to it by the defendant. According to Bauer, PPPRA responded in writing attaching the documents submitted by the defendant. Bauer went on to narrate that when the commission received the response from PPPRA, they compared it with the ones Peters submitted and found that Peters had claimed he imported 6,000 MT each, with 2 letters of credit financed by then Springbank PLC, which was not the case. Bauer, in his elaborate testimony, further told the court that in the course of the investigation, which began in 2012, the EFCC had several correspondences with the DMO, PPPRA, Enterprise Bank, Corporate Affairs Commission CAC, Staco Insurance Company, Delani Petroleum Corporation, Skybank, and Q&Q Services Nigeria Limited. Based on the findings of the investigation team, the PPPRA was asked to recompute the money owed to the defendant, and it was found out that he was overpaid 761,628,993 naira 84 kobo as subsidy funds for PMS he claimed to have imported. According to Bauer, the defendant allegedly used forged documents to claim subsidy funds for 12,000 MT of PMS, whereas he only imported about 6,000 MT. Atta sought to tender the series of correspondences between the EFCC and the various companies and organizations contacted in the course of investigation. According to Atta, the companies and organizations supplied the EFCC with documents indicating that fraudulent documents were used by the defendant to obtain subsidy funds from the government. Isiramen, however, raised objections to their admissibility, raising earlier arguments. Ruling on the objections, Justice Ogunsanya only upheld Isiramen's argument to the admissibility of the letter of the EFCC to the registrar of the CAC, being a photocopy with no certification, but admitted all the other documents, marking them as exhibits P8 to P25. Thereafter, Bauer told the court that Abubakar was invited to the EFCC and he gave statements on January 28, 2012 and February 8, 2012. As our test sought to tender the statements, Isiramen again raised objections, arguing that he was detained in EFCC custody and subjected to inhuman conditions, and he was not given water and food. Ate, however, told the court that the defendant was never given an inhuman treatment and that the statements were in fact not confessional statements. Thereafter, the trial judge dismissed the objection and admitted the statement in evidence marked as Exhibits P26 and P27. The case has been adjourned till November 1 and 2, 2021 for cross-examination of the witness. The defendant is also standing trial before Justice C.A. Balogun of the Lagos State High Court sitting in Ikeja for an alleged 1.4 billion naira subsidy fraud due for October 5, 2021 for continuation of hearing. Ojo Chokutami Eche for The Eagle. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in collaboration with stakeholders in the pension industry, is set to organize a 2-day sensitization workshop with the theme Eradication of Pension Fraud in Nigeria. The workshop is scheduled for October 5 and 6, 2021 at the NAF Conference Center, Abuja, and is expected to serve as a platform for sensitization and practical exchange of information on how best to eradicate pension fraud in Nigeria. The workshop is expected to be graced by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation SGF, Mr. Boss Mustafa, anti-corruption agencies, members of the legislature, and the National Pension Commission, PENCOM. Other participants expected at the workshop include officials from the Military Pension Board, Police Pension Board, Pension and Records, Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget Office, National Union of Pensioners NUP, Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate PTAD, Retirement Benefit Advisors, Pension Fraud Administrators, and civil society organizations.
Asset forfeiture or asset seizure is a form of confiscation of assets by the authorities. It typically applies to the alleged proceeds of instrument of crime. This applies but is not limited to terrorist activities, drug-related crimes, and other criminal and even civil offenses. Some jurisdictions specifically use the term confiscation instead of forfeiture. The alleged purpose of asset forfeiture is to disrupt criminal activity by confiscating assets that potentially could have been beneficial to the individual or organization. Ojochokutami Eche is standing by with the Director, Asset Forfeiture and Recovery Management of the EFCC, Aliyu Yusuf, in this interview segment to shed light on the issue of asset recovery in the fight against economic and financial crimes. Over to you, Ojochokutami.
Hello and welcome to the interview segment of the program today. My name is Ojochokutami Eche, and I'm here with the Director, Asset Forfeiture and Recovery Management, EFCC Headquarters, Mr. Aliyu Yusuf. Mr. Aliyu Yusuf, welcome on the program today.
Thank you very much.
We're talking about asset forfeiture and asset recovery in the fight against economic and financial crimes. So, Mr. Aliyu Yusuf, what exactly is the meaning of asset forfeiture?
Well, asset forfeiture is the legal process of recovering proceeds of crime or unlawful activity for the purpose of returning same to the victim. That is basically the definition of asset forfeiture. And in asset forfeiture, it has a lot of processes, legal processes in court, to get these assets forfeited.
Do asset forfeiture and asset recovery mean the same thing, or is it are they two different words used in the same environment?
Asset recovery has elements. It begins with identification of the assets, then tracing, then attachment, and then you now approach the court for either interim forfeiture or final forfeiture, as the case may be.
Let's look at the different types of asset forfeiture that we have. In the line of duty, what are these different types that you have encountered, that you have seen so far?
You have the interim forfeitures, and then this usually pursuant to maybe investigation. Maybe investigation is ongoing, an asset is traced, then you approach the court to grant interim forfeiture, either pending the conclusion of investigation or pending the prosecution of the case in court. And the reason is that there will be need to prevent the dissipation of the assets, to preserve the asset from being dissipated or tampered with, pending the conclusion of either investigation or prosecution of the offender in court.
Okay. And then the after the case is over, the final forfeiture happens.
Yes, as the case may be. If the case is over and the offender is convicted, and the court finds that the asset that's under interim forfeiture was actually proceeds of the crime for which the offender was prosecuted, the court can order final forfeiture of the assets. And when court orders final forfeiture, depending on the victim, if it is government, the final forfeiture, might be in favor of the government. If it's a state government, if it's an individual, if it's a corporate entity, the court will order that the asset be used as a restitution to the victim.
Talking about the place of asset forfeiture in the fight against economic and financial crimes, how effective is it? Why is it so important? Why asset forfeiture in the fight against crimes?
Yes, asset forfeiture has helped. As a matter of fact, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, provides for asset forfeiture, and Article 51 to 59 of that convention enjoin countries where assets stolen are recovered to return such assets back to the countries where the assets were originally taken. That's to show how important asset forfeiture, is. And if an offender or a corrupt person is prosecuted and asset is recovered. It serves as a deterrent, actually, because what is the motivation for corruption? Is the reward, the assets, that they are going to derive, the benefit they are going to derive from, the act of corruption. And once you take that benefit away, there will be no motivation, for corruption. So it's an important tool in the fight against corruption. That is why also the other conventions, the African Union Convention against corruption, for the prevention and combating corruption, also make provision for recovery of assets. The ECOWAS protocol on fight against corruption also make provision for recovery of assets. So it's an important tool in the fight against corruption, no doubt.
Now, you'd ask some people, and people especially who have the tendency to be corrupt or to be involved in economic and financial crimes, and they'll tell you that, after all, I have to do what I have to do to get by. After all, if an EFCC gets a hold of me, or if the law gets a hold of me, all they need is maybe I plead guilty and then do some plea bargain, or one or two things are taken away from me, and the rest is there for me. How sure are you that asset forfeiture can go so deep as to become a deterrent factor against economic and financial crimes?
Yes. First of all, you talked about plea bargain. Plea bargain is not, there are principles, there are procedures, plea bargain. When an offender wants to opt for plea bargain, it doesn't mean that, some part of what he has stolen or what he has taken will be left for the person, and while the government takes part. As a matter of fact, plea bargains requires that everything, if an offender wants to opt for plea bargain, whatever he has stolen, he has to return it, and then in addition to punitive measures that the court might impose. So the idea that, I'll opt for plea, I'll commit offense and opt for plea bargain, I go back to enjoy, whatever I have stolen. I don't think that that is true. It runs against the principles of plea bargaining. So it is not true.
Okay, now, and then asset forfeiture.
Yes.
How sure are you, especially working in the departments, that you have been thorough enough to get all the assets? Is it possible to even get all the proceeds of crime from a criminal or an offender, as you call them?
Well, what we do is that we try our best. The law, bordering on asset tracing. We enforce the EFCC Establishment Act. Already put procedures there on, tracing of assets. So in doing that, we collaborate with some other agencies. The land registries in various states, AGs in Abuja here. We also collaborate with the Code of Conduct Bureau. That body saddles with the responsibility of keeping asset declaration information about public, officers. And then we also have intelligence that we also rely on in tracing this, assets. So as far as the commission is concerned, we have done well in that in that regard. So we have tried in that regard. So.
Okay, now, while you were talking a while ago, you mentioned even assets outside the country. So for assets outside the shores of Nigeria, what happens to them if a defendant is found guilty?
Well, Nigeria is a signatory to convention, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and which I mentioned earlier. And that convention enjoins countries to return stolen assets that have been recovered in their territory back to the victim countries. So we have leveraged on these conventions. I mentioned the African Union Convention on Prevention and Combating Corruption. And we also have MOUs with several countries, the United States, UK, the UAE, and so on. And with these instruments, we have cooperation with these foreign countries, either in the course of investigation, they help us to trace the assets and even obtain restraint orders. And then this is reciprocal. Similarly, if they have to carry out investigation over certain things in Nigeria here, we also render assistance. So for assets based in foreign countries, we leverage on these conventions, to get the assets repatriated. And the case in mind of recent, you heard about the return of Abacha loot, by the Swiss government. And we had, other cases that the UK and the US government have returned assets back to Nigeria. So this is how it is handled.
Now, the defendant might have repented of whatever crime he's been accused of. Why seize his assets? Why not just prosecute him and let him pay the price in prison? Because a lot of people are dependent on him as well. Yes, then if that is the case, then the justice would not have been served, because these are assets, there are victims, and these are stolen assets or assets acquired illicitly or illegally. So there are victims of this crime, and these assets have to be recovered so that the victims can be restituted. For instance, money is meant for development projects are stolen. So it will be unjust to leave such funds with the offender and say, okay, he has repented and all that. The monies have to be recovered and, given back to the victims of the crime, which is the people of Nigeria. Yeah. Now, Mr. Aliyu Yusuf, how would you describe the journey of the Department of Asset Forfeiture and Recovery of the EFCC so far? Well, the journey has been very, very successful, and it's in the public domain. The EFCC has done so much in recovery of assets, ranging from real estate to vehicles, to vessels, petroleum products, and so on. So the record is there for all to see. And with the coming of the new chairman, Abdul Rashid Bawa, is repositioning the commission to even achieve more than we have been doing. So Nigerians should expect more from the EFCC with the coming of this new chairman.
Well, there you have it. As said by the Director, Asset Forfeiture and Recovery Management of the EFCC, Aliyu Yusuf, Nigerians should expect more from the EFCC, as it is glaring the efforts the Commission has put in place is yielding results. Please don't forget to play your part in seeing corruption brought to its barest minimum. When you see something, you say something, and rest assured, EFCC will do something about it. The agony that victims of investment fraud go through cannot be quantified. Many businesses have folded up and new ones are finding it difficult to sprout and be sustained. So for people who would like to invest in one business or the other, be careful so you don't fall into hands of fraudsters. Investment scam is real. Be vigilant.
The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in collaboration with stakeholders in the pension industry, is set to organize a 2-day sensitization workshop with the theme Eradication of Pension Fraud in Nigeria. The workshop is scheduled for October 5 and 6, 2021 at the NAF Conference Center, Abuja, and is expected to serve as a platform for sensitization and practical exchange of information on how best to eradicate pension fraud in Nigeria. The workshop is expected to be graced by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, SGF, Mr. Boss Mustafa, anti-corruption agencies, members of the legislature, and the National Pension Commission, PENCOM. Other participants expected at the workshop include officials from the Military Pension Board, Police Pension Board, Pension and Records, Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget Office, National Union of Pensioners, NUP, Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate, PTAD, Retirement Benefit Advisors, Pension Fraud Administrators, and civil society organizations.
And that's how we end today's episode of The Eagle. Do not forget, for matters relating to economic and financial crimes, please send an email to info@efcc.gov.ng. And to speak to our representatives, you can call 0809 3322644 and follow us on all our social media platforms at official EFCC. If you see fraud happening, use the EFCC mobile app, the Eagle Eye. Download the app, follow the steps, and report fraud on the go. You can also take pictures of corrupt practices and upload them. My name is Aisha Mohammed. I leave you with these parting words that says, integrity is the ingredient that will enable you to forge rapidly ahead on the highway that leads to success. It advertises you as being an individual who will always come through. Whatever you say you will do, do it, even if you have to move heaven and earth. Goodbye. God bless Nigeria. Please stay safe and be kind to one another. Thank you.